This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Facebook suspends Russian account said to influence domestic politics in the DR Congo. We look at the implications of Twitter's ban on political adverts, especially in Africa. And Nigerian traders attacked by Ghanaians in the city of Kumasi. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Robertson, Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, second quarter of 2019 sees Tanzania's economy grow by 7.2%. And in sports, Uganda's Sevens rugby team ready for qualifiers against Kenya and Zimbabwe. US social networking giant Facebook says it has suspended 3 accounts linked to Russia for attempting to influence domestic politics in the Democratic Republic of Congo and 7 other African countries. Facebook says the accounts supported particular political figures and ridiculed pro-democracy activists. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more.
Facebook says close to 200 fake accounts were being used to reach more than 1 million followers in Africa. The accounts with links to Russia are alleged to have tried to influence politics in the DRC and 7 other African countries. Cyber experts say some of the pages appeared geared towards building support for Russian deals in gold, diamonds and other natural resources. The DRC is rich in natural resources, but mineral reserves have fueled conflict in the east of the country for decades. Congolese authorities told CGTN they are unaware of any individuals or companies that worked with the Russian-linked accounts. The social networking site has declined to name the individuals who worked with the accounts in the DRC. Russia has in recent years made efforts to build strong relations with African countries. This comes barely a week after Russia held the first ever Africa-Russia summit in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Now let's cross to Moscow where our correspondent Neha Punia is on standby. What's been the reaction in Moscow to this?
The reaction here in Moscow has been along expected lines. There's been a significant pushback at the kind of allegations that have surfaced with this news coming out. You've got the head of the Foreign Affairs Council of the Russian Federation Council saying that this particular purge by Facebook raises many questions about how the organization calls itself neutral and apolitical and not biased. He's saying that this was clearly done at the behest of the United States, and he's also called out the content that was in question here, saying that none of it was propaganda but was simply critical of certain policies and geopolitical events playing out in Africa as well as the rest of the world. And here in Moscow the sense is that Russia also allows a lot of anti-Kremlin content on its websites, particularly on Facebook, and if it were to do what Facebook has done here, it would similarly purge all of that content. So a pushback and definitely a lot of incredulity expressed at what Facebook claims Russia was doing, completely denying that, saying that in Africa Russia was no way trying to influence domestic politics, but was simply using these accounts to express criticism of certain policies.
And Punia, do you think the move by Facebook might be connected to the just concluded Russia-Africa summit in Sochi, considering some of Moscow's global rivals have previously raised questions over its increased activities in Africa?
The timing is certainly very interesting. Just last week you had 43 heads of state from Africa here in Russia at the Black Sea resort city of Sochi, where President Putin was wooing them himself. The red carpet had been rolled out for Africa to try and ensure that the message was received that Russia is interested. It might be late to the Africa scramble, but it is here to stay. And the message that most countries walked away with during that 2-day engagement was that Russia is promising something that many Western nations are not, which is the promise to protect the territorial integrity of African nations and to respect their sovereignty. And in light of this allegation that Russia, through these 200 fake and possibly compromised accounts, may have tried to influence geopolitics, is certainly very damning. But if you look at the kind of modus operandi of these accounts, according to Facebook, they were mostly in favor of existing governments. They were running a lot of content that came from state-sponsored and state-run media accounts here in Russia. So clearly an attempt to prop up existing governments and run down or pan pro-Western parties in many of these countries. So many might see this as Russia doing what it said it would do, which is back up and protect existing governments in many African nations.
Okay, Nihal Punya there in Moscow. Thank you very much for that update. Moving on to similar news. Twitter will stop accepting political adverts. That's according to the company's CEO, Jack Dorsey. Dorsey argues that political message reach should be earned, and paying for reach removes that decision. The company insists its decision was based on principle and not money. It made less than $3 million from political ads in the 2018 cycle. The announcement comes amid intense scrutiny of Silicon Valley's handling of political ads. His comment also puts him at odds with senior Facebook executives who have vigorously defended their policy of not fact-checking political ads. US President Donald Trump spent the most on digital ads in the 2020 election. His official for his campaign has been quick to respond that the move will have little effect on his re-election campaign. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Alexandria Williams, a Nairobi-based researcher, commentator on digital cooperation, technologies, and a legal analyst. Thank you very much for coming in to discuss this. Do you think that political advertising via Twitter is a big threat to democracy, especially in Africa?
Absolutely. You know, for a lot of people in countries in Africa, when they think of the internet, they don't think of the internet as a standalone thing. They actually think of a lot of apps like Twitter and Facebook and even YouTube. So when they go to access information on politics or what's happening around them, they go to these social media apps and can be highly influenced by what's occurring there.
So it seems that that is a big influence,
yes,
Twitter. What impact do you think this move by Twitter will have on political advertising in Africa, considering that politicians still use traditional mediums like radio and TV to reach the public?
Well, I think what's important to remember is that while the older population in Africa tends to use television and radio, younger people tend to be more prone to social media like Twitter. And in many African countries, the younger population outweighs the older population quite heavily. So we see that, you know, social media can still be highly influential, especially Twitter. We've seen cases in places like Kenya where retweets have led to people being deported. You know, so Twitter is highly influential and still will be highly influential.
But mainly, as you say, among the younger
mainly among
people.
the younger population, I believe.
Yeah. And what would you say are some of the cases of misuse of political advertising on Twitter in Africa?
So a recent case was in South Africa just last month, where there was a rise in xenophobia that led to the deaths of many people with political motivations were using social media to spread information that were helping exacerbate the protests and helping direct some of the anger of the protesters to certain subsets of the population. And that became quite deadly for a number of people.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for coming in. That was Alexandria Williams there, based in Nairobi, researcher, commentator on digital cooperation and legal analyst. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to other news now, to Ghana, where more than 100 foreign-owned shops in the city of Kumasi have been forcibly closed by Ghanaian traders. Most of the shops were owned by Nigerian traders. The shop owners insisted that they were running their businesses legally. This is not the first time foreign-owned shops have been attacked in the city. Well, now let's get you more on this. We have Phil Ehaze in Abuja for us. Phil, what exactly is happening in Kumasi and why are Nigerian businesses being targeted?
Well, thank you, Karen. What we know so far is that there's been several attacks or perceived attacks on some Nigerian traders in the spare parts market that's in Accra and Kumasi. We also know that the response from the Association of Traders there, also known as GUTA, they are saying that they're accusing the Nigerian traders there of not abiding by the laws of the association, by the Ghanaian laws in that retail sector, the spare parts industry or spare parts market, as you like. And that's the reason why. And they also say they've actually made complaints to the government of Ghana, inter-agencies, to wade into the issue and try to ensure that the Nigerian traders abide by the laws. But as for the fact that they're accusing them and saying that the Ghanaian government has not responded yet, they have decided to take laws into their hands. But we know that the Ghanaian government and officials, especially security operatives, have said that they are looking into it, and that no one, and that's talking about Ghanaian indigents now, no one is expected to take laws into their hands. In fact, we also heard that security operatives have been patrolling those areas, the spare parts market, to ensure that peace and calm is restored in those areas.
Thank you, Phil. Nabil, we've got Nabil Rufai for us in Accra. The same question to you. What exactly is happening in Kumasi? Why are the Nigerian businesses being targeted there? What's going on?
So, Karen, basically traders here in Ghana who are engaged in retail business and also petty traders have been worried for a very long time now, the fact that foreigners are controlling the retail market and also engaged in petty trading, which is actually against the country's law. The law bars foreigners from engaging in retail business, and for some years now, Nigerians have been controlling that market. They bring in cheap goods and sell it at a very affordable prices to a lot of people, kicking Ghanaians out of business, and the situation is not being addressed by authorities. And we know that for now there is a border closure in Nigeria, and Ghanaian traders are not able to push their goods into Nigeria. So once they've not been able to really get authorities to react to their concerns for a very long time about the fact that Nigerians are engaged in retail businesses, this time they are trying to put the laws into their own hands, and they are locking up shops belonging to Nigerians and also asking them to just move out of the market. But then on the other hand, Nigerians are also saying that the Economic Communities of West African States, ECOWAS protocol, actually allows them to engage in businesses in Ghana because they are part of the member states of ECOWAS. And that's where the problem really is, the fact that ECOWAS allows Nigerians to also practice their trade here in Ghana, but then Ghanaian laws actually bars foreigners from engaging in retail businesses. And Ghanaians are not happy about the fact that Nigerians are having their way here in Ghana, and authorities seem not to be handling the situation well.
Okay, thank you, Nabil. Returning to you now, Phil Ihaza in Abuja. When something similar happened in South Africa, we saw the Nigerian government take a strong position on the matter. Should we expect the same now?
Well, thank you, Karen. At this point, it might not be safe to compare both incidents exactly how it happened, because in South Africa we saw more animosity against foreign nationals, especially Nigerians, even in the case where some people were killed, properties were destroyed, shops were burnt down, and it was an attack on foreign nationals, specifically saying they should leave the country. But at this point, it is more like a row over, or disagreement over trade agreements. Just like Nabil said, that the ECOWAS community, has a free trade agreement among West African member states, and Nigeria and Ghana are seen as some of the major countries in that agreement, and that's the reason the Nigerians trading there are using that agreement to back whatever actions they're doing. And then, of course, the Ghanaian traders are saying in Ghana there is no law that backs retail trading. So I see it as government at government levels. I see that communication is ongoing, although we haven't heard any response from the High Commissioner or Nigerian government as it is. But in Nigeria, there is hardly any serious, response or response, from Nigerians in the country. Things are still peaceful and calm. We're just waiting and hoping that both governments resolve this and ensure that this doesn't snowball into the kind of situation we saw in South Africa.
Okay, thank you, Phil. One last question to you, Nabil. What's being done to calm the situation? Have there been any long-term solutions developed to prevent this happening again?
Karen, for now, there's not been any long-term solution to resolving this, and that is why it keeps festering. Early part of this year, we saw here in Accra, traders in the Central Business District also doing the same situation that's going on in Kumasi at the moment. They actually locked the shops belonging to Nigerians, saying that they would want the government to enforce the law that bars foreigners from engaging in retail business. That has not been addressed. That's why the situation is going on right now in Kumasi, because the situation has not been handled well by the government. Now, we understand Ghana's deputy minister is in Nigeria at the moment, and what he's actually saying is that Nigeria has a bigger muscle when it comes to doing business. So Ghana had to tread cautiously in terms of how it wants to resolve this. The fact that it has closed its border, we need to come to an amicable solution to this. And he actually wants the traders here in Ghana to actually exercise restraint and calm down as they go into talks with Nigeria to also open up its border, so that it will be a win-win affair for both countries. While Nigerians can ply their trade here in Ghana, the border in Nigeria will also be open so that Ghanaians can also send their goods in that country.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was Nabil Rufai there in Accra in Ghana, and earlier, of course, we spoke to Phil Ahaza in Abuja in Nigeria. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Ethiopian government responds to criticism over its handling of violent protests in the country. And Guinea's counter-rally backs President Alpha Conde's constitutional bid. Thank you very much.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister's office has held a press conference a week after violent anti-government protests which left more than 78 people dead. The Premier has come under sharp domestic criticism of the government's handling of the violence. CGTN's Guram Chala has more.
Violence broke out last week in major parts of Ethiopia's largest Oromia region. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's press secretary said in a press briefing the death toll is now close to 80. And more than 400 people suspected of killings and instigating violence are now under custody. Investigations also continue.
The latest information that I have in terms of perpetrators that have been apprehended is 409 individuals that have been apprehended. So these figures are also subject to change, obviously, as the investigation work continues and proceeds. But rest assured that the ongoing investigation work and the ongoing work to hold all perpetrators accountable is going to ensure that people who have committed these crimes and people who have been agents of perpetrating these crimes as well will also be held accountable.
The government, on the other hand, is said to have been busy exerting reconciliation efforts.
Key component, and which is a key foundation to sustaining peace and stability, not only in this particular areas, but in the whole country itself, is the reconciliation work that elders, national elders and traditional and religious leaders have been engaging with the affected communities. So these discussions are ongoing, and also high-level government officials, including the Prime Minister, have also gone to some of these locations as well and engaged with the local communities to understand what were the challenges, what are the divides, and be able to also address them. So these things will also continue.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is still facing criticism at home for what some people refer to as bad handling of the recent violence and lack of proactive response to. Be it as it may, many still have hope that the Nobel Peace Prize winner Prime Minister will turn things around for the better. Drumtana CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
In Guinea, thousands of protesters have marched in the streets of Conakry demanding a referendum on the constitution. The demonstrations are also in response to last week's mass protests called by opposition parties and civil society groups who have rejected proposals for constitutional reforms that could allow the president to run for a third presidential term. CGTN's Chao Ngono with the details.
Tens of thousands of people thronged the Conakry airport in support of President Alpha Condé. The president was returning to the country after a trip abroad. Only 2 weeks ago, violent protests against the leader's suspected bid to prolong his rule claimed around 10 lives. According to estimates, some 45,000 people took part.
We have no schools, no roads, no nothing. As a citizen, this annoys me. So why have a new constitution? I don't think we need one. Guinea already has a constitution which has enabled the government to make decisions, pass decrees from 2010 until now. I think it's the best constitution that Guinea could have. We don't need to replace it.
Guinea's President Alpha Condé came to power in 2010. His second term ends next year. He launched constitutional consultations in September. His adversaries say the president will try to push through an amendment allowing him to seek a third term.
I came to welcome my president Alpha Condé from Russia today. And we are here again to respond against the National Front for the Defense of the Constitution. It had a very large mobilization, which is now disturbing the people. When you're fed up with something, you have to respond.
His first election victory in 2010 raised hopes for democratic progress in Guinea after 2 years of military rule and nearly a quarter of a century under authoritarian President Lansana Conté. But his critics accuse him of cracking down on dissent and violently repressing protests, charges he denies. Chamwono, CGTN.
On to Somalia now, and campaigns are in top gear ahead of a presidential election planned for early 2021. 6 political parties have now merged as they seek to challenge the incumbent administration. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has more.
This new coalition brings together 6 political parties, including 2 led by former Somali presidents. The announcement comes as the country gears for national elections planned for next year. Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, who served as president from 2009 to 2012, was picked to head the Forum for the National Parties, an umbrella body of political parties opposed to the current administration.
The Forum for National Parties is open to the public and offers a platform to everyone. Our objective is not to target individuals, but to address matters of national interest. We have no enmity against anyone. We have principles, and this is what we will use to further our agenda.
However, a number of opposition political parties failed to join the umbrella coalition over what experts term as leadership dispute. The team is yet to pick its flag bearer for the upcoming polls.
There have been similar conditions in the past, but this one is expected to form a political space and a platform to challenge the government, highlight its faults, address international community, and political space for politicians with political ambitions.
Parliamentary election is set to take place mid-next year, followed by presidential polls in early 2021. The current president, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, is yet to declare candidacy for re-election. Authorities and the Independent Electoral Commission are yet to announce the electoral model for the next election cycle. In 2016, clan elders picked an electoral college comprised of 14,000 delegates that helped form the current parliament that later picked the current president. The delay in announcing election model has angered key opposition figures in the country, including former President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who lost to the incumbent Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo during the last election cycle.
We want democracy to prevail and be a pillar of stone for this nation. Everything we do must be in accordance with the Constitution. In case things don't work as planned, we must be included in the decision-making process that has always been a part of our culture as Somalis.
A campaign period has officially started. Lawmakers are now expected to return to their respective constituencies to seek a fresh mandate to represent their regions in the next parliament. Among key issues of concerns during this campaign period will be tackling insecurity, eradicating extremism in the country, war against corruption, strengthening the country's economy, among other key issues. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
In Nigeria, the government has lifted the ban on 2 international aid agencies operating in the northeast. The military shut down operations of the Action Against Hunger and Mercy Corps over a month back. They were accused of aiding and abetting Boko Haram. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
A cherry news for the UN-affiliated humanitarian organizations and over 350,000 people in the Northeast who depend on them for food aid. The Mercy Corps was shot September the 25th, barely a week after the closure of the Action Against Hunger. The military say they were providing food and medicine to Boko Haram terrorists, accusations which they denied. But the lifting of the ban isn't without restrictions. All aid agencies, alongside their merchants operating in the region, would have to undergo intense scrutiny and proper registration. More than 50,000 people have been killed in Boko Haram's 10-year conflict. Millions have been displaced, and they are largely dependent on humanitarian aid for their survival. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
All of the business news coming up for you after the break, including second quarter of 2019 sees Tanzania's economy grow by 7.2%. And this Ugandan entrepreneur is cashing in on poultry farming.
An open platform to a market of close to 1.4 billion people. A new platform strengthening global economic cooperation. A progressive platform promoting innovative growth and inclusive development. Join CGTN and its integrated media teams as we take you to the second China International Import Expo in Shanghai. We'll show you how the expo reflects a new era of China's opening up, how it builds a shared future of global economic prosperity, and what this means for consumers, businesses, and policymakers. Only on CGTN.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tanzania's National Bureau of Statistics says the country's economy has grown by 7.2% in the second quarter of 2019. That increase has been driven by construction, mining and communications. CGTN's Daniel Kicho has more.
A welcoming ceremony for David Mabuza. Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan greeted his South African counterpart at Beijing's Great Hall of the People Thursday. After reviewing guards of honor from China's People's Liberation Army, they co-chaired the 7th plenary session of the China-South Africa Binational Commission.
The plenary session will not only enhance our bilateral ties and cooperation, but also exemplify to the world that two large nations are upholding multilateralism, fairness, and justice.
Wang says the world is at a time of uncertainty and instability, especially with the rise of unilateralism and protectionism. Both China and South Africa are major developing countries and representatives of emerging market countries. Therefore, the development of Sino-South African relations has a growing impact on the international stage.
Both our countries have unique strength and are of big influence in respect of promoting peace and stability in our respective regions. South Africa believes that peace remains the core eminence.
The China-South Africa Binational Commission was established in 2000 to serve as a platform to address core issues such as trade promotion and economic exchange. China is South Africa's largest trading partner, and South Africa is China's largest trading partner in Africa. Bilateral trade volumes have increased more than 20-fold since the two established the diplomatic ties 21 years ago. South Africa is one of the continent's leading economies, and China is the largest developing country in the world. The two have forged a comprehensive strategic partnership that's operating at bilateral, multilateral, and continental levels. And Mabuza's visit is expected to further cement the bilateral relations. Tuhuao, CGTN, Beijing.
The Nigerian government says it's working on how to inject sanity into the social media space, which it believes is totally out of control. The country's information minister claims social media today constitutes a real danger to the unity of Nigerians. The proposed regulation, however, has garnered a lot of backlash. Activists say the law unfairly targets criticisms that the government does not like. This is not the first time Nigerian legislators have tried to crack down on social media. In 2016, an attempt during the first tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari to regulate sites was rejected. At the time, Nigerians argued that the same platforms aided Buhari's election the previous year. Staying with Africa's biggest oil producer, Lagos is not just Nigeria's commercial capital, it's the country's most populous city. It's estimated that nearly 6,000 people come into the commercial hub every day with no plans to leave. CGTN's Deju Badmus explores how the mega-city dream is now turning into a nightmare for many in Lagos.
With a population of over 21 million people, Lagos is Africa's most populous city. It's also a very densely populated city, with a density of around 6,871 residents per square kilometer. And by 2050, the city's population is projected to double, which will make it the third largest city in the world. But it would seriously lag behind in terms of infrastructure compared to other large cities of the world. Even at the moment, the city's infrastructure is overburdened by its large population.
Now, every Lagosian would tell you that the biggest headache they confront on a daily basis is commuting around the city. Whether it's going to work or returning, keeping appointments or running errands, it could be a nightmare. Traffic jam is something you never can avoid. And it's one of the reasons why your best bet of commuting around the city is using these guys.
So I do a morning show that starts at 6 a.m. That means I need to leave the house at 4:30 a.m.
to get to the office at about 6 a.m. So that's my daily life, every day of my life for the past 7 years. So it's pretty hectic and it could be pretty challenging on your health and family. It's very tough.
The government of the city estimates that at least 1.6 million vehicles ply Lagos roads every day. Of that figure, it estimates that 226 cars run on the city's roads per kilometer. The national average is 16 cars per kilometer. That clearly explains the city's notorious traffic jam, and it's the residents who are bearing the brunt.
It's a major problem because, whether we like it or not, I mean, since there's no rail, I mean, you have to go by road. So, except the rail option is adopted, which I think is a major capital-intensive thing, which will take years to actualize. We have no choice than to, cope with whatever is happening in Lagos with the attendant inconveniences.
The government of the city is actually building a light rail to ease its transportation challenge. But the project has almost grounded to a halt for lack of funds. By the time it's completed, the dynamics of the population may have changed.
But we can plan for population growth. Data would show us how many people we would have, how many children are being born every year. But we don't take a look at data. If we don't work with data, you can't build cities. For traffic especially, you need to look at where people work. Why do people move far distances to work? Do we need to bring workplaces closer to where people are, or build more affordable houses? For instance, build more affordable housing on the island where most people work, come from the mainland to the island. So if you build affordable housing there, they don't have to travel long distances. If some offices are on the mainland or you work remotely, it's also very easier.
Working and living in Lagos could be quite interesting, but it could also be quite annoying and frustrating as well. Those who have gotten used to the city somehow fall in love with it and devise their means of dealing with the troubles it throws at them. But if authorities do not do more than they're doing at the moment to match the infrastructure with the population growth, the city may sooner than later buckle under the weight of its own population. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Regulatory reforms in Nigeria have propelled the sub-Saharan African economy to among the most improved in the World Bank's rankings for ease of doing business. The Doing Business report measures the cost to firms of business regulations in 190 countries. In our series, we continue to look at the rankings of several African countries. Today, we monitor Egypt, which has jumped 6 places in this report. Yasser Hakim has the details.
The World Bank report has reflected an improvement in the ease of doing business in Egypt. Some of these improvements can be attributed to better infrastructure.
The 4 aspects that saw a better performance are the ease of establishing business, better access to electricity all year round, the tax collection system, and protecting minority shareholders. As for the finance sector, banks have eased the facilities and conditions to offer loans for foreign investors.
One of the main challenges facing businessmen in Egypt is red tape and bureaucracy. Adel Nasser, an Egyptian businessman, says he faced such issues before, but he confirmed that investors have been working with the government lately to remove these hurdles.
The latest amendments in the investment law have been based on our chamber's suggestions and talks with the government. One of the issues we pushed for was to allow investors to transfer their profits abroad and in dollars too. It was prohibited before. Another obstacle we worked on is to reduce the time needed to release imported raw materials from the ports. It used to take ages and incurs huge costs on investors. Now it has become faster and easier to receive your raw material for production.
Experts say there were promising developments in the last couple of months. First is the drop in interest rates by the central bank and further cuts expected before the end of the year. This will facilitate loans for businesses to be established or to expand. Secondly are the new free zones where factories can be built free from red tape with attractive tax-free incentives.
The government has allocated pieces of land in most cities free of charge for industrial projects. This was done to encourage businesses to establish factories, begin production, and employ skilled workers. Incentives are given for investments, especially in Upper Egypt, that has a lot of potential.
These steps could encourage more investors to put up shop in Egypt. However, in spite of the improvements, Egypt is still ranked 114 out of 190 countries. It has to climb up that ladder if it wants to attract more investments in the near future. And to do so, some experts believe Cairo has to work harder on easing regulations for businesses.
There are several regulations that need attention, like registering loyalty rights, fighting corruption, as well as new bankruptcy laws. Another issue is the speed in executing court decisions and protecting contracts. This has to be addressed to increase foreign investments in the country.
Egypt says it targets to attract $10 billion of investments in 2020, up from the current $7 billion. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
From an initial 1,000 to 10,000 birds. That's the story of one Ugandan entrepreneur cashing in on poultry farming. CGTN's Hilary Ayesika caught up with Saddam Esegbagala at his farm in central Uganda and filed the following report.
Taking stock of his business, 27-year-old Saddam Sebagala rears chickens for meat. He was inspired by his father.
When I was done with university, I tried to look for jobs here and there. Things were hard, so when I tried to talk to him, he was like, you come and maybe you help me out with the farm, managing it. All of a sudden, I also started liking it. And that's how I got the love for poultry farming.
He began his own business in 2015 with a loan of $1,000 from his father.
I started with 1,000, then I gave him his money, the initial capital. I came on adding the number. Right now I'm doing 10,000 birds per batch.
He supplies hotels and supermarkets. For 4 years now, Saddam has been rearing chicken. He says the business is not labor intensive and it is profitable. He's now encouraging young people to take up the business.
I have gained knowledge in rearing chicken, but I'm also able to engage in other farming practices.
But like any other business, this one also has limitations.
The price for the maize has doubled. That's also a very big challenge, because in this feed we use, maize takes like 50%. That means now the profit I was looking at has gone down maybe by a quarter.
Figures from Uganda's Bureau of Statistics show that 70% of Ugandans are employed in agriculture. But many young people look elsewhere for employment opportunities. Saddam believes as the demand for food in the region goes up, more young people could take up farming as a livelihood. Hilary Ayesika, CGTN, Kampala.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including...
They bed and break bread with demons under the sun. They build homes beneath broken skies.
One of Africa's biggest poetry festivals kicks off in Lagos, Nigeria.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
One of Africa's biggest poetry festivals is underway in Lagos in Nigeria. The Lagos International Poetry Festival, which runs for 4 days, features poets and writers from across Africa and Europe. CG10's Deji Badmus has more.
We are dodging death every evening.
Busisiwe Mashlangu is one of over 50 poets and writers headlining the 2019 Lagos International Poetry Festival.
Why won't you wake up?
For this 23-year-old, this form of literature is more than wordplay and rhymes. It's a means of conveying a powerful message and correcting ills in her society.
What I want to do with my poetry, I want to build language where I don't have language, for the things I don't have language for. Like if I want to talk about shame and I don't know what shame looks like, I use images for that because words are not enough. So what I do with my poetry, I want to paint, I want to color, I want people to be able to see the things I'm talking about, not just hear them.
Because the road is flooded.
Unlike Busisiwe, who traveled all the way from South Africa and is a first timer on the stage, Chika Jones, a Nigerian, is a more familiar face at this poetry festival. The part-time poet and digital marketer uses his poems to highlight diverse issues in Nigeria, covering several subjects.
I have a couple of themes that are pretty constant in my poetry. Violence against women, I talk about that a lot. The Biafran War, I talk about that a lot. Then there are also some smaller themes, like rain, like love. I talk about those things too. So it depends on what I'm thinking about and what I feel is important for people to know.
The festival is the brainchild of Nigerian poet and literary artist Efe Paul Azino. After years of sharing his poems on stages across the world, he sought a way to get other literary minds to do the same. He then came up with this festival, which goes beyond stage presentations.
We started in 2015 because at the time there was basically a flowering or a resurgence, of poetry, of literature, and of the arts generally, particularly on the global stage. We had, Nigerian artists doing amazing things all across the world. And we wanted to create a platform, to celebrate that in Lagos. And poetry particularly because it's been a fantastic time for poetry, across the continent. Almost every city you go to, you can find an open mic spot where, young people particularly gather to vent, to express themselves, to address the issues that affect them as they see them. And we thought it would be interesting to create, a global platform to celebrate that.
You know the women of whom I speak. They bed and break bread with demons under the sun.
Nigeria is home to some of the most popular names in African literature, but the art of poetry seems to be on the decline, with fewer people taking to the art. Organizers of this event say the festival is projected to help change the narrative and get more people to appreciate poetry.
So we're looking at having a Young Writers and Creators Lab where we bring established writers and authors from across the world, in touch with younger people who are basically trying to find their own voice.
Often considered the oldest form of literature, poetry has been used to shape thoughts and reflect culture. The Lagos International Poetry Festival will wind down with an exchange program involving poets from Nigeria, South Africa and the United Kingdom. This, the organizers say, will help bridge racial gaps and minimize differences in dialogues. Dejibatmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, in Algeria, the 24th edition of the International Book Fair of Algiers has kicked off. Publishers and book lovers from around the world have flocked to the capital city. Visitors can take a look at over 183,000 books. They'll also get to visit pavilions showcasing books from across the continent. This year's guest country of honour, Senegal, also has a few authors present at the fair.
The African book is very important. I visited the Senegal pavilion and the wing of other African countries, and I think it's time to look at African culture without barriers or prejudices.
I consider the presence of African culture in the exhibition as a step to correct the misconceptions of Algerians about Africa, where they portray us as a continent of hunger, poverty, war and death.
All the sports news coming up for you after the break, including Uganda's Sevens rugby team ready for qualifiers against Kenya and Zimbabwe.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Uganda's Sevens rugby team will be vying to reach the Olympics for the first time in the country's rugby history. Head coach Tolbert Onyango, tasked with helping the team achieve that feat, is optimistic that with recent success his team can book a place at the Tokyo Games. Onyango has served as Uganda's Sevens head coach over 2 stints. The second, that started in 2015, has been most successful so far. Appearances at the World Sevens Series have been followed by 2 African Rugby Sevens titles and qualification for the 2017 Sevens Rugby World Cup. Onyango has seen several young players rise through the ranks. Now, with the 2020 Olympic qualifiers this November, Onyango hopes his younger